reduce the risk of direct confrontation. Now, to discuss more on that, we've been joined by two guests online. Let me introduce them to you one by one. Dr. Mustafa Kener, who is an assistant professor at the Sarkaya University Middle East Institute, joins us from Turkey. Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa, to have joined us. We've also been joined by Matthew Bryza, former ambassador, White House and senior State Department official. Matthew, pleasure to have you on board today as well. We'll begin with you, Matthew Bryza. How defined are the US government's objectives in deploying additional military assets towards the Middle East in response to Iran's recent threats?
Well, I don't have access to classified US government information anymore, so I can only guess. And my guess is not very clearly defined. First of all, President Trump had redeployed significant naval assets away from the South Asia area region or the Middle East to conduct his arrest of and rendering of former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. So the U.S. reduced its military presence. Now it's returning some assets. As you said, the USS Abraham Lincoln is on its way from the South China Sea to the Middle East. But I think President Trump doesn't really have clear military objectives in mind because he doesn't have clear political objectives yet in Iran. What has been reported, though, is that his military planners and national security team provided him with several different military options tailored to specific goals, ranging, it's been reported, from regime change to intimidating and destroying some of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps capabilities and facilities to attacking energy and economic assets. So I don't think President Trump has decided his objectives yet. So therefore, there's no single military plan. There are just options. But each option, of course, is highly defined. But what seems clear is that militarily, the United States is not going to be able to foster regime change in Iran. The protests are calming down. And President Trump seemed actually quite relieved, that he didn't need to use military force when the Mullah regime decided not to execute 800 protesters that it had been threatening to do. So I think the tension is decreasing. Military plans options are clear, but the plan is not clear.
All right, so let's hope for the best anyways. Dr. Mustafa, from Turkey's perspective, how volatile is the current situation in Iran for the wider region? Because as per Matthew, the situation is kind of dampening now with time passing.
Thank you for having me on your show, first of all. I think Turkey currently believes that the situation on the ground in Iran is under control, totally under control of Iranian leadership, and they exert full authority across the country. In fact, even while the protests were ongoing, our Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan stated that the regime would not collapse and eventually would regain control of the situation, the unrest in the country. Nevertheless, it doesn't mean that Iran is now a problem-free country. Turkey also acknowledges Iran's deep-rooted problems, and these problems should be solved by Iran itself within the country without any external intervention or any meddling, because this is also one of the principles of Turkish foreign policy when it comes to its relations with its neighbors: non-intervention, non-interference in the internal affairs of the neighboring countries. So Turkey also follows that principle in the Iranian case. Turkey's priority is to, keep Iran one piece, not fragmented, not divided, to protect Iran's territorial integrity, and also, and because the fragmentation or any kind of instability in Iran would pose a real serious security threats for Turkey, starting from border security. Border security will be compromised, and fighting against drug trafficking would be so difficult, and the irregular immigrant activities, and also, other problems related to some separatist armed groups, which not only pose threat to Iran, but also, pose threat to Turkey as well, like PJAK, armed group, a terrorist group. So Turkey's view from the very beginning was, that Iran's territorial integrity should be protected, the stability in the country should be maintained, and Iran's problems should be solved by Iran itself. And Turkey sees that now the situation is totally under control of the Iranian leadership. However, the problems inside the country, still persist, and that means that in the coming months or years, there might be another round of protests. So Turkey is, cautious about that and taking some precautions against that kind of,
He is basically cautious about the entire situation and, of course, says that this is Iran's internal matter. Matthew, can diplomatic channels reduce the risk of escalation between Washington and Tehran, given the increasingly personal rhetoric between President Trump and the Iranian leadership?
Oh, yeah, they already did work in de-escalating the U.S. military threats. So it's been reported that just like last week, so the middle of last week, Wednesday, I believe, was Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, called President Trump and urged him not to use military force against Iran because of all the destabilization that could happen, as our Turkish friend Mustafa Bey was saying just now. In addition, the leadership in Egypt and Qatar similarly requested that Trump not use military force, as did, very interestingly, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu reportedly was worried that were the U.S. to attack Iran, Iran would likely strike back at Israel. And without more U.S. military assets in the region, and having shot off so many air defense missiles last summer, Israel, according to Netanyahu, felt unprepared for the likely Iranian counterstrike that would come Israel's way. So diplomacy did work to de-escalate the situation. And I think as long as leaders like Turkish President Erdogan do what the professor was just saying, and remind President Trump of how regionally destabilizing a bigger war with Iran could be, and how much economic devastation and political problems that could cause for Turkey, including from PJAK and the PKK, the more likely it is that President Trump will simply use military posturing as a diplomatic tool, but not actually use force.
All right. Mustafa, I'd like to understand what are the implications on the repositioning of U.S. forces, including aircraft carriers, fighter jets, as far as regional security and alliance coordination is concerned?
I think that means that, first of all, I agree with Mr. Matthew that the U.S. Now doesn't have a clear, strategy regarding Iran. There are several options, and these options, all of them have their, costs and also, possible gains. But in my view, the United States is, engaging in a show of force, a muscle show, because it wants to demonstrate that not only in the Caribbean, not only in the Asia Pacific, but also in the Middle East or West Asia, it remains a hegemonic power, and it also wants to keep the military pressure on Iran alive, because it generates some kind of deterrence. And I think President Trump wants to talk to Iran, and also today in Davos he said that Iran wants to talk and we are going to talk. He made a similar remark during the protests, and he did the similar remark today, the second time. And I think that there is a possibility of talks, and diplomatic channels are open, but at the same time, U.S. wants to show its military power in the Middle East, because there are still some unfoldings in Syria, in Gaza. There is a peace process, in Gaza. So United States wants to show itself as the one and only hegemonic power in the region. And I think that is the reason, and the other states, other powers will position accordingly.
All right. Before we move to the next, I'd like this last question for you as well, Mustafa. What role could international organizations or third-party mediators play in order to prevent military confrontation and encouraging de-escalation?
As you know, in these times, nowadays, unfortunately, international organizations' role in preventing conflicts or preventing wars are unfortunately diminished, decreased, and the norm-based international order, as you know, yesterday's Davos meeting revealed, this is disappearing. So, unfortunately, international organizations or third parties now have relatively, less power. However, I think that lobby groups in the United States have really, they are really powerful in determining the U.S. decision regarding Iran. There are, a couple of different groups. They are in competition with each other. They are, trying to influence President Trump's decision. So I think the lobby groups inside the United States, they are relevant. And also, like Mr. Matthew pointed out, regional powers, they have, the power to prevent, hedge against that kind of, external intervention or U.S. intervention. And they did that successfully. So I think rather than international organizations, states and lobby groups are, they are more powerful when it comes to, influence the decision of President Donald Trump.
Interesting perspective. Thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa Kane, Assistant Professor at Sarkaya University Middle East Institute in Turkey, to have joined us